Hey guys, so today we're going to be working with motion graphics, 2D motion graphics, just to explain a little bit of all the fundamentals you have to look for, everything you have to do, and how to get started with motion graphics. Just to begin, a small little note, everything revolves around your timing and your keyframes. All of these things will give you the best results for motion graphics, and of course a sense of animation, meaning the way you look at certain things and the way they move and the way you feel they're supposed to move will actually help you for your final result. So I have After Effects opened here, CS6, and I'm going to go to my composition, top left, new composition, and let me zoom in on the settings right here. So it's a 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, and I'm going to make it 30 seconds, well around 15 seconds, something like that, it's not a problem, and press OK. We have a black background, so that's fine. I'm going to rename my composition by clicking on it, right click, rename, and calling it main comp. So, first steps first, we're gonna be looking at how the shape layer, right here, and the pen tool next to it will create shape layers. So, the first one is gonna be a normal circle. So click and hold on the rectangle and create an ellipse tool. I'm gonna draw it out by clicking on shift as well to keep a uniform scaling. And just place it there. For me to center everything around the middle of my composition, I need to go to my windows and I need to go to align right here. When I click align, I get a tool which is over here on the bottom, and I have to click on two buttons. This one right here, horizontal center alignment, and this one on the right, vertical center alignment. This will ensure that my shape or any layer that I create inside of After Effects will be centered around the composition's center itself. Now, a few things to do. One, once I create my shape layer, I do not want any fill inside of it. So this button right here, the fill, if I press Alt click on it, it will cycle through a few options. So for an example, the first one is a full color, second one is a gradient, horizontal gradient, the next one is a radial gradient, so center to the outside, and the last one is no fill. So I would like to have a box that is gray with a small red line on it. Next, I have my stroke. Same principle goes for the stroke. I can have a gradient stroke, a radial stroke, no stroke at all, or just normal color stroke. And if you want to change the color of your stroke, you have to click it and change the color to your desired hue and saturation. Next, pixels next to it allows me to increase the size of my stroke. I'm going to keep it around 5 for now. Next, to be able to create animations inside of shape layers or when you're using the pen tool, I have to go to content right here. So I have to open my tab by clicking on this little arrow next to the blue box, content, and I have an add feature right here, and I'm going to be clicking on trim path. Now once I do this and I open the entire content of my shape layer, I have a small little box right here called trim path on the bottom left. So as I go through it, I have a start, an end, and offset. So end will make my shape itself go from invisible to fully visible. So if I go halfway and I click here, you can see it's actually half of it. And as I scale it up to 100%, it will fill out the entire circle. So how can we animate this for something pretty simple? I'm going to turn on my stopwatch. That's to indicate After Effects that I'm going to be animating the end piece right here. So at 0, I have nothing on the screen. If I move my time a little bit forward and I click on around 15, this will create an animation by pressing space that fills that little gap. Now, what if we want this little line right here to start rotating around the entire perimeter of the circle? Over here on this keyframe, so I make sure my line is strictly on that keyframe, I will create a new offset keyframe as well, move forwards a few seconds, and change this rotation all the way until it gets to the original point right here. And if I look at the effect it's doing, perfect. Now, the animation itself is kind of slow. That means that the keyframe itself is a bit far from the original keyframes over here. So I need to push it all the way closer. Closer keyframes together, it's a faster animation. Further away, it's a slower animation because it has to cycle through more frames as it animates. So let's push it a little bit closer. That's good enough. Perfect. Now, once it reaches the end, I would like for it to disappear. And it's not with the end keyframes, it's actually with the start. So I'm going to click on my start stopwatch as well, right here. And it created a keyframe as well. So I'm going to move a bit forward. And I'm also going to set this start to 15%. And now the actual shape disappeared. So this is the animation we have so far. Cycles through, gets to the point, and disappears. Now, what's amazing about motion graphics is that such a simple animation can be enhanced in a certain way by just copying the actual layer itself. So let's call this first animation. Okay? Control copy, so Control C, Control V on this specific layer, and I get first animation 2, so I'm going to call it second animation right here. And all I'm going to do is move this little layer a little bit forward. And also what I'm going to click on is S for scale, and I'm going to scale it down just a tiny bit. So what's going to happen now? As this animation goes through, the second one will actually start a little bit later because I moved my layer a little bit further away from the other one, giving it a different time. And with the scaling, they will never intertwine between each other. So you can continue doing this. Control copy, Control V, moving it forward, scaling it down a little bit less. Control copy, Control V. Again, moving it forward a little bit, scaling it down. Once more. And scaling it down. And now I have this motion graphic animation. Now let's look over a few more things. So let's say I stopped all the way here. I have all of these layers, and I would like pretty much my workflow and my space, my workspace to be a bit cleaner than this. So what I'm going to do is set my animation, my line all the way here until the animation ends. Let's say call it 8 seconds right here. I'm going to press Alt and the bracket symbol on my keyboard to be able to cut this, the right bracket symbol. And I'm going to make sure that this animation stays here. Next, I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to right click and say pre-compose. By doing pre-compositions, you're able to organize your workspace, that way you have less clutter on the layers. So this is going to be initial animation. And also here I'm going to cut with alt brackets, because I know that all my animations end on this point. So for you guys, if you would like to go back to the actual layers that you were working on, just double click on initial animation. It will take you back to where you fixed it up, and to go back to the main composition, it's right here. So you have the main composition right here, initial animation on the right. All I have to do is click on main comp, and that's where you're working on the actual video. Perfect. Next, let's look at something else. I'm going to create a line. So using my pen tool right here, top left, I'm going to create a new shape. Let's make it a little bit more rounded. Great. And what I can also do with this, inside of the contents, inside of shape 1, so I'm just opening up the settings here, content, shape 1, all of that. I'm going to go to stroke next. So stroke, and I'm going to add a few dashes over here. So under the miter limit, you have dashes. If I press on plus, this will create dashes, as you can see. So I'm going to increase the gap between them, so I can get something like this. And using trim path, so again, content, right here, add, trim path, I'm able to animate this to disappear completely. So end clicked on, go to 0, move a bit forward with the time, and go back to 100. And this will create this style of animation. This can be done with a simple line, a line with some dashes, and a few more settings that you can use and play around with these dash gaps, offset, all of these things. All right. Now I got to this point, I'm gonna make everything disappear by the time it reaches here. So start, go back to the beginning, and go to 100. So now my line gets disappeared completely. Okay? Next, let's look at how we can utilize circles a little bit more. So as you can see from my intro, I have this kind of a circle with basically lines that are popping out and just disappearing. I'm going to take an ellipse tool, again, pressing shift to make sure it's a perfect circle, aligning it with my align tool on the right here. I press on this button first, the highlighted one, and I press on the vertical one, the one next to it. And my circle is perfectly aligned to the composition. Next, what you can do is a few things. One, you can create multiple circles that have trim path and just scale, or, so in this case, I can just create a trim path, scale, right here. I can go to 0, click on scale, animate, go to 100%, or actually here, well, let's do something a bit better. Let's go all the way out of the scene, just like so, 368%. That way I get an animation that looks like this. Let's add a few things together. So control copy, control V, move it a bit forward, control copy, control V, move it a bit forward, and now I get an animation that looks like this. Now my last one is a bit off of the actual animation, so let's go back here, move this a bit further closer, there we go. There we go, a little bit better. Next, how about we use something with a normal pen tool. So I'm going to use my pen tool. I'm going to draw a line. Click, shift click all the way up, just to create a very small line. This will ensure that my line is perfectly straight. That's what I have so far. Great. Next, I'm going to be using this actual shape layer and multiplying it multiple times. So I'm going to go into my shape layer 5, contents right here, same thing, add, and I'm going to add a repeater right here. Go into the repeater settings, and let's look at the copies. Copies, I'm going to add a few more. That's number 1. 2, I'm going to go to transform repeater right here, and I'm going to make sure that the scale, where is it, first of all, the position. So position, I want to change the X position right here, the 100, to 0. This will make sure that all of the lines are actually on top of one another. And all I'm going to add is a rotation right here. Alright? And next I'm going to move the anchor point on the y-axis anchor point, so it's the one on the right, just like so. And reposition my entire composition to the center. My entire, shape to the center. And scale it down a little bit just to make sure it fits perfectly. Great. Next, I need to get my pivot point right here. This little cross where my mouse is at. I need to get it to the center. So click on the Y tool and center it. Next, what I'm going to add is a trim path. So again, content, trim path. I'm going to make sure the end is at 0. Animate it. So click on the stopwatch, move a bit forward. Go to 100%. There we go. And here I'm going to go start as well. And I'm going to move forward a little bit. Try to keep these keyframes all together at the same distance basically. And I'm going to add a 100 on that, giving me this animation. Alright, so how do we make keyframes basically animate a bit better, smoother, if you will? I have to select the entire keyframes, and I can press F9 on the keyboard. This will make sure that these keyframes, first of all, they change the way they look. So they're not anymore basically a quad, they look more like little boxes. Alright, Or you can go right click on the keyframes after I select them, right click, keyframe assistant, and say ease ease. Okay, this will allow this animation to go a little bit smoother. Perfect. So this was just an introduction on how motion graphics work. On my next video, I'm going to be talking about how we can utilize motion graphics with a few text effects and see how that actually improves our basically logo design or introduction design for videos, just like I did for this video introduction. All right, thank you very much, and hope to see you on the next video. See ya.